This scary story is called The Haunting at the Old Farmhouse. This is my actual story that happened to me when I was growing up. I lived out in the country, about 5 miles from town. There was not much around, and I lived in an old farmhouse with my family. In the direction of our house, there is a main highway where travelers would sometimes come down, and our house is on the other side of this road. Our farmhouse was over 100 years old and had been remodeled a few times inside. One thing that was never really remodeled was the doors. The doors were big and heavy, and they were those old doors that had holes for like a key to lock it, but there was no keys. You just tried to shut the door, but since the house had settled so much, the doors couldn't really close, so you could press them against the wall to slightly shut them, but that was about the best you could do, or you keep it open. I never had any experiences until I was around 6 years old. I had had the door slightly open, probably around an inch or two, and I remember waking up. My bed had been facing towards the door, and I started coming to and realizing that it wasn't possible what I was seeing, and I was seeing a luminous blue light trying to get into my room. It was around the size of a large dinner plate, and it was letting off its own luminescence, which was a light blue color. It wasn't a baby blue, it was darker than that, and it was emitting it, and the light was kind of coming off of it like it was pulsating light, but it was coming from itself. This moved of its own will, slowly moving back and forth in zigzags, and then stopping for a few seconds, and then moving again, trying to look into my room. And it went from the bottom of the door to the side of the door, towards the inside of my room, to the bottom of my door, and then around the top, as if trying to peer in. I was trying to look in from the hallway, but it could never actually get in, so I never visibly saw it. I could just see its light and the pulsating light emitting from it. I was fully awake at this part, being incredibly scared, and I threw a blanket over my head and eventually fell asleep. When I told my parents about this, they said, well, it is probably the light from the cars coming down the road on the opposite side of the house. So, for the next few nights, I kept my door open and watched through the window to see if I could see it. And there were cars, of course, coming down the road in the middle of the night, and none of the lights ever hit exactly in that window. But the window was so high that no lights from any vehicles could come in like that. It'd have to go up and down to angle at me. So I knew that was not the case. Whatever that light was had a will of its own, and all I know is that it was trying to get into my room, and I don't know why. After that experience, I didn't have any other instances of that light, never since. And then around the time when I was 15, there were some other paranormal experiences. These were more frightening to me, because it didn't just happen once. As I got older, I guess I got braver because I kept my door open, completely open. And I'm a very light sleeper, so any noise will kind of wake me up. And being on the second floor, we have wooden boards in the hallway and on the stairs. So you can hear when someone has to get up and go use the restroom and go down the stairs. And periodically my sisters would walk across the hallway to the top landing, which is right outside my door, and go down the stairs, use the restroom, come back up. But one night I was laying there and I heard someone coming up the stairs. First of all, I thought, oh, I didn't hear them go down the stairs. Well, maybe I was too tired and forgot or didn't hear it. But I heard someone slowly walking up the stairs, very deliberate, slow steps, and I could hear the pressure of their weight on the boards on the stairs. And they slowly trudged their way up and then stopped at the top of the landing, which was right outside my room. And after a few seconds, I thought it was very bizarre. Like, why would they just stop right there? Don't they know I'm sleeping right here in this room? So they must be staring right at me. So I kind of wake up and look. And I could obviously see from the light from outside, coming through the window, the whole top of the landing. And there was no one there. And this disturbed me because I know I heard the pressure, the weight of someone walking. But then as I thought about it, I didn't hear what would sound like if someone had, say, a body attached to them. I could hear the weight, but I didn't hear their skin sliding against the carpet and the sound of someone who has skin walking on the steps. It's hard to describe, but you can know the difference. So after this instance, I started shutting my door as best I could so my door would not be wide open. Since I was out of school and it was the summertime, I would often like to stay up late when it was cooler and read. I started hearing the weight of steps going up and down the halls. And I remember them going from one end of the hallway, going down the hallway, passing in front of my door, and going to the other end. And incessantly, someone was slowly walking back and forth. One night as I was reading, I started to hear the footsteps going up and down the hall again. And I was wide awake. It was probably around 9 or 10 at night. It was completely dark. And I had my lamp on in my room. And I heard them. And I just listened. And they walked back and forth and back and forth. But being frightened, I asked, "Who's there?" And immediately the footsteps stopped. So I jumped up and opened my door, and there was no one there. It had been 1 second since I had said, "Who's there?" And there was no one. These footsteps would continue on and off. All I knew is that it seemed to happen that summer. It didn't happen every night, but it did happen periodically, at random nights. But for some reason, this thing, whatever it was, started walking up and down the hallway. And it never stopped until I said something. And then I would say, "Hello?" And immediately, I'm talking immediately, the steps would stop. Now I know some people might be brave enough to just open the door while the stepping is going on, but I was never brave enough to do that. And I asked my family, I said, have you heard this? Because my other family members kept their doors open at the ends of the hall, and no one had heard this. When this got to its worst part was this one night. My back had been hurting, and my bed for some reason was uncomfortable. So on this hot summer night, I decided to lay down on my carpeted floor, and maybe it would help straighten out my back a little bit. So I grabbed some blankets and laid down. I was just a couple of feet from my door, but I hadn't heard the footsteps for a few nights, so I was a little more brave than normal. During the middle of the night, my dad came in to say goodnight and then went back downstairs. But as this walking continued, I started to wake up and realize something was wrong. When you're used to hearing people walking, you can tell how far away they are from where you are. The stepping was not going up and down the hallway. It was right outside my door, which was only 3 feet from where I was laying. I sat up from the floor. Whatever this thing was walking in a circular motion, consistently, non-stop, as if you had someone walking in a very small circle in the same place over and over again. And I was extremely frightened, and it was only a few feet from where I was. So I was too scared to open my door, so I said, hello? And again, immediately, the sound stopped. So I jumped up, turned on my light, opened my door, and nothing was there again. This had to stop. And I had heard a rumor that you could ask a ghost to leave, and they will leave. Now, I personally felt somewhat threatened because this thing seemed to be targeting me. It stopped on the landing right outside my room. Nobody else heard it but me, and now was walking in a circle right outside my room. So, after opening the door, I made a decision and I told the ghost to leave. And then I went to sleep. The following morning, my sister had an early morning interview. So as she went to get ready that morning, she said the house felt eerie, and it seemed off as she got ready that morning. And as she was doing her hair, she heard a voice as if someone was whispering. And I'll call my sister Susan for the sake of this story. The voice said, "Let's scare Susan." And she was frightened and opened the door, and there was no one there. That same morning when I got up, I also felt the house was eerie, and I felt like I was being constantly watched and zeroed in on, and it just felt wrong. So after my sister's interview, she told me about that voice she heard, which she said sounded like me, and I told her about the situation where I asked the ghost to leave. So she said, maybe you should invite him back. My parents had said that a long time ago, a person had died in that house, a man they thought his name was George. And when I told my parents about this, they thought perhaps George was the one protecting us. So after having that eerie experience, we asked him to come back. And the house felt much warmer and felt much friendlier, but I never heard the footsteps again. In summary, this was a very strange experience to actually have happened to me. And when you experience something like that in real life, it's completely different than when people tell you about it. So if you are ever wanting to have a paranormal experience of your own, just be careful. We don't want to dig up more than you can handle. So thank you for listening. Sleep tight. Good night.